Yeah, we're live. I'm early by almost an hour. It is 5:57, so just before 6 o'clock here in sunny California. Excuse me. Tonight, what I want to talk about is I am or I have ordered my T56 trans for the LS swap for the 5-liter Mustang that you see up here. This is my 1988 5-liter LX notch. Mustangs like God and nature intended. It's the car. I'm the original owner of this car. So for the people that don't know, I bought this back in November of '87 and bought it brand new. I am the original owner and bought it to go showroom stock racing way back in the day and did SCCA showroom stock. That's how I got my license and stuff in racing, and went on to do World Challenge racing and US touring car and a bunch of stuff. So, but the reason that I bought this car is so I could do that kinds of racing. But what I also did was we did lots of top speed stuff with it. That's really what I cared about, was going fast, especially after going to, now we had run the La Carrera race with other cars before this in a Camaro. And going fast is really cool. That's, if you guys are not familiar with it, the La Carrera was a race down in Mexico from San Felipe to Ensenada, where you race basically kind of in the middle of Mexico, and they just close the beginning of the road and close the end of the road and just let you roar down the on these roads down in Mexico and go as fast as you can. And it was an awesome thing. You had to have moderate safety gear on the La Carrera race. We just had a Camaro with a hooker show bar in it and modified it a little bit. And I think that thing went like 135 or 140 miles an hour or something. We put, really tall gears in it and stuff. So it was fun. But the Mustang I took out to 12 different Silver State races for 12 years in a row. In fact, the guys that you're seeing here, Bernie, you could see the little 240Z back in the back. You can see that car now. And this is where we met. And so this is way back, and this is either the first one or the second one. And actually, this is probably, it was later than that, because when I first took this car, it didn't have this stuff all over it. It didn't have the writing and everything on it. It was more stock looking. But you can see here, it's got, I don't remember if those are 16 or 17-inch wheels. They're Elites. And we had a kind of a modified motor. This thing would eventually have a Vortec supercharger on it and trick flow heads and the 224, 232 cam. And it had the crane version of that, and then a GT40 and a Cobra style kind of intake manifold. And it did okay for stuff back in the day. The Vortec obviously worked very well and worked great for the Silver State race. And it worked very well. Ended up going as fast as 197, I think, was the highest that we got clocked at, something like that, 192 or 197. And that might have been with the R trim that we went that fast, but it originally went out there with an A trim and then also with a B trim, that same Vortec. It was serial number 001. So it was the very first blower that they did. And we upgraded it to a B trim, and we did a lot of testing with it, but it spent like 85,000 miles on this Mustang. And for one of them, they let me use the R trim that Kenny Duttweiler did for the Carcraft car, because just as a quick aside, they contacted me and said, hey, do you think that we can build a motor that would make the Mustang go 200? Because I had done more top speed stuff with Mustangs than probably anybody in the country at the time. And they said, do you think we could build one that will go 200? Like, and have it be smog legal? No, you're not going to be able to do that. And so I think I was originally going to be the guy that was going to do this project, and they said, okay, well, I think that I said no was the deal breaker there, and they went to Kenny. Not that I should be building motors. Kenny is way better at that, and he ended up building a motor that was nowhere near it wasn't anything that had anything to do with being emissions legal. It was a bigger motor. Everything was, it had a big camshaft in it. It had that R trim Vortec on it. It had all these things on it that obviously would make it not anything remotely close to being emissions legal. But at any rate, I had this Mustang. We did all this stuff with it, and it was awesome. Now I'm going to put the car back on the road. I bought a T56 trans for it, and now we're going to put an aluminum LS in it. And we're going to be doing testing with a lot of stuff, including turbo stuff. But if I ran it in the Silver State, which is what our discussion will be about tonight, I would not run it with a turbo in the Silver State. I would run it naturally aspirated. So the combination that I would run it with in the Silver State would be like the L33. It'll probably have forged pistons in it. They'll be flat tops like the factory pistons are. It will have ported heads on it, like those 220 heads. It'll have the Richard Holder Performance Truck Plus camshaft in it. It'll have a fast manifold, and it would run like that, which would mean it would be near 500 horsepower, probably flywheel. So let's say it makes 400 wheel horsepower with a manual trans. So that's kind of the configuration that I would run it in. We wouldn't be trying to set records with it or anything, or do any of that. We would just like to go out there and go fast, have the thing did what it did, finishing every race except for one when I blew it up spectacularly with the R trim in it. And then because we didn't do any tuning really per se on the thing, we just ran a lot more boost with the R trim and went out, and it went fast, and then that's when it went 190 something, and then it torched the head and did all kinds of stuff. But the question becomes, how fast can we go? And with the T56, the one that I will be putting in here, it has the important gears for the transmission are, in fact, I'm going to run this thing so that we can kind of see what all these calculations are. You guys can take a look. You can see the car, and then the automotive math book that I used has the gearing or the multiplications that we need to arrive at different like speeds versus RPM. So what I did here, you can see the results of the math that we did. Basically, if you want to figure out and calculate the speed of the vehicle, independent of the horsepower, because we're not talking about that. You'll need horsepower to do this, but just to get the theoretical speed at a given engine speed, the mile per hour equals RPM times tire diameter over gear ratio times 336, which is a constant. Now the gear ratio has to be, you can see we have different gear ratios for fourth gear or fifth gear or sixth gear. Fourth gear is 1-to-1. So that would just be, and I did it on the math here that you could see. I calculated it with a 308 gear, which is what the car originally came with. Because back then when you bought these Mustangs, you could get either a 273 gear with a 5-speed, or the optional gear was a 308, which is what I got. The automatics, you could also get a 327 gear, but you couldn't get that with the stick transmissions. They didn't offer that. But I calculated it with a 308 gear, a 355 gear, or a 373 gear, all options that you could have, not from the factory, but from the aftermarket, to put in an 8.8 rear end, which is what we would be running in this car, because we just run a stock rear end, which I'd been running for this whole time, or maybe something that's slightly upgraded. That's not going to be a problem. We're not going to hurt the rear end really, other than getting the diff hot from sustained running like this. But I calculated the theoretical speeds using fourth, fifth, and sixth gear, mostly so that you guys could see what the jump is in speed between gears. So on the T56 Trans, we have and I didn't list it here, but we have obviously fourth gear is 1-to-1. Fifth gear is 0.8. And then sixth gear is 0.63. And you might want to check my math on the fifth gear stuff. I don't know if I used 0.8 or 0.82. I thought it was 0.82, I think, but I may have used 0.8. But at any rate, you see, you get an idea. So, and then I used 6,000 RPM as the ceiling, but in sixth gear, I also showed what 6,500 would be. Because if we look at the motor in here, this theoretical L33, it's not theoretical, but this combination, if we were to run this thing with the ported heads and the fast and this Truck Plus camshaft, my guess is from 6,000 to 6,500, we'd have a very, very comparable like power output. So I put both of those just in case people wanted to see what it was at higher RPM, but that was only in sixth gear. And the reason that I did other gears besides the 308 was because you see in sixth gear at 6,000 RPM, and I also calculated this with a 275/40 17-inch or tire, because that's probably what I would run on there on the back. And that tire is 25.7 inches in diameter. That allowed me to have all of the variables I need to do all of this calculation. So you can see at 6,000 RPM in sixth gear with a T56, that Mustang with that tire size and a 308 gear, at 6,000 RPM, we'd be going 236 miles an hour. Now, this is why I chose other gears, because that's not realistic. I mean, particularly with it, like if we put an 800 horsepower turbo motor, yeah, we could go that fast. But if we running a 500 horsepower or thereabouts, naturally aspirated 5.3, that's not a realistic power output. I mean, that's for that kind of mile an hour. It's never going to go that fast with 500 horsepower. It takes way more horsepower than that with a Mustang that's not terribly aerodynamic. I mean, this is not a Corvette. This is not a Honda Insight. This is not anything that's really super aero or a Firebird. You know, it's not any of those things. Mustang's not great. I mean, I love the Fox Mustang, but let's face it, it's not any of those other things in terms of aero. So what I did was also I did calculations for 355 gears and 373 gears, because those things would probably give us a more realistic potential for top speed. So I'll make a post here. Do you think that a 5.3 liter making 500 flywheel horsepower could get to go 200? Okay, so the question is, and there's no poll here because with this streaming, I can't do a poll, or at least if I can, I don't know how. Do you think that a 5.3 making 500 flywheel horsepower could push this Mustang to 200 miles an hour? Do you guys think that that's possible? So if we look at the gearing here on a 373 gear at 6,000 RPM with that tire size in 6th gear at 6,000 RPM, we would be going 195. So I put that gear in there because I think that that's kind of realistic. Even if we can't get there, then we just go, okay, well, we need more power then. Let's say we need a little bit more power. Like I wouldn't put 4 series gears in this. A 373 would be about as much gear as I would want to put in it. And the thing with a 373, I've driven the car with 373s and a T5 in it, and it's a lot of fun. It's fun around town. And given the overdrives in this thing of 0.63, and even the 0.8 in 5th gear, we can also have like plenty of top speed. And the thing that I really like about this, and the reason that I wanted to include 4th, 5th, and 6th gears in this, is you can see the situation that I had with a 308 gear and the 225/60 tire that I had, which is slightly smaller in diameter than the 275. The thing that I had, the problem that I had, was shifting from 4th to 5th, going from 140-ish miles an hour in 4th gear at 6,000 RPM, then shifting into 5th. It just, with a stock motor, it's just not going to pull anymore. The nice thing it did is it dropped RPM way down, but it's never going to go I think that transmission was a 0.68 and not a 0.63, but it's just never going to go that fast. It doesn't have enough power to pull that. And we have a giant step in between what the power potential or what the speed potential is for that gearing. So if we look at this just as an example, it's not exact, but it gives us an idea. We'd have to jump from 149 to 236. I mean, that's forever. What is that? 80 miles an hour or something? Let's see. So from 50 to 23, from 15 to 23. Yeah, that's like 80 miles an hour. That's what the split is between 4th and what would be 6th gear in that T5 trans. That's too much to overcome, basically. So it's nice having the intermediate gear there so that we can go 4th, 5th, and continue to pull. And the other option here, if we kept the 308 gears in there, instead of running in 6th gear, we could just run it in 5th, which we would be going 186 at 6,000 RPM. And if the thing had enough power and it wanted to go more than that, and we could run the thing to 6,500 RPM, we'd have, we could do a quick, I didn't do the calculation on there, but if we just divide 186, if we divide that by 6 and then multiply it by 6.5, we would be going right at 201 in 5th gear with the 308s. So we could also do that. So, this is kind of the thing that I like to play with. And I, quite honestly, totally my favorite part of putting together Bonneville packages and projects and stuff that I did a lot of in choosing the gear splits, like for the Civic and for the Kazashi and all of these things, just trying to figure out, okay, what is the RPM spread, like the important one, because all of this is irrelevant in the lower gears. It will go to red line in first gear and second gear and third gear, and certainly in fourth gear, in depending on the gearing, definitely in fifth gear. And then what's going to happen, like with a 373 gear, what's going to happen when we shift from fifth to sixth? Where is it now going to pull up in sixth gear? With a 308 gear, the concern would be, okay, we've topped out fourth gear at 150 miles an hour. Now what's going to happen when we shift into fifth? How much power do we have? How much more RPM will it now pull? Having dropped down in RPM in our shift to fifth gear, how much now will it pull? And those are the things, like I said, those are the things I love. I love doing the gearing and the potential mile an hour and doing all that stuff and going, hey, we're going to be going this speed and this speed and this speed. And it's all obviously good stuff. And then doing this motor in the Mustang, I would have cold air and all that going into it. But it would be, it'd be interesting. It would be fun. It would be good stuff. So, but I don't think that, you guys let me know, I don't think that 500 horsepower in this Mustang is enough to go 200 miles an hour. So you guys let me know. I'm sure you guys let me know what you thought. Music, Eric, what's going on? No audibles. Knowledge, Scottish. What's going on, Sean? Car's a beauty. Yeah, it doesn't really look like that anymore. It's now red and black. Car's originally black. It probably needs to be put back to its original color. Is that an SVT? No. It's just a 5-liter LX. We call it mass in the UK. There's usually more than one number involved. That's why it's plural. Yo, Mustangs. It's a long time to own a car. That's right. I'm going to save this episode for tomorrow, gentlemen. You have a good night. All right, man. We'll see you. Dustin, what's going on? Only 13 likes. Come on. Missed the opening, but I know that Fox hatch we dragged in 2008. We went that same speed with a 373 and a 308, both went 154 in the quarter. Yeah, that's a drag race kind of thing. Have you heard of a guy named John Gutierrez from Memphis or BB&T Racing out of Mississippi? I haven't heard of those. Are they drag racers or something? Makes me miss my 86 SVO. Yeah, those are cool. 0.50 is going to need a whole lot of horsepower. You're running a Dominator. That thing got a Hemi. What type of power do you think it made with the R trim? I don't know. I honestly don't know if we made 500. I'm think, well, it probably did. I think once we got the kind of final iteration of the blower, if I remember right, I want to say that it was like 430 at the tire, but that was not with the R trim. Don't forget, tires can get slightly larger as a heat up. Yeah, we did all that. In 07 and 08, we went the same top speed. Watch your mouth talking about Fox bodies. I'm a fan of Fox bodies, obviously. Do you think a 5.3 making 500 horsepower could get the Mustang to go 200 miles an hour? What happened to the original engine that was in the car? I actually took it out of the car and then did a ton of testing with it. And honestly, I don't really remember what ultimately ended up happening with that. I think if I remember right, I think it was used in our Bridgestone supercar, if I remember right. And I think that car got sold. It was a car from Bear Racing that we had used, and then we had modified it. The original one might even been in that extrude-honed World Challenge Mustang too. I know it was in one of those cars. No, I don't think it'll go 200. There's one yes. Bill's thinking yes. The car was a thrown together a hillbilly build, so it went from a nitrous big block to a turbo big block, at which point there was no more money left for the correct converter. Was it NASCAR hitting 200 in the 70s with 500 horsepower? I don't know what their motors were making, but their big blocks that they were doing made at least 500. But those were probably more aerodynamic than the Mustang. How much distance would you have to travel to hit top speed? I don't know. With the Silver State, we have 92 miles, so we have all the distance that we can use. But I never tried to. We never measured to see what the distance was to top speed. I had a super light Fox body with 273s and 28-inch tires. Ran out of road. Yeah, unfortunately, the lightness doesn't do anything for speed. Well, I retract my answer. Look at the Corvette, not even the new one. An LS3 Vet goes around 190. I don't think a stock one does that. In fact, that's what I was kind of basing this off of. I think that a 500 horsepower LS7 does a 500 horsepower LS7 go 200? I know that, and I also know that the 400 horsepower ZR1 was a 180 mile an hour car. My Turbo 2 RX-7 with 500 couldn't push through the air, and it's way more aerodynamic. An RX-7 with 500 horsepower should be fast. Daytona had restrictor plates to go 200. The Daytona cars didn't have restrictor plates for a long time. Back when they had big blocks, they didn't have restrictor plates on them. The restrictor plate came later on with the small block stuff. I think it will, especially if you put a bow tie on the front grille. How was the question? Not a poll. 75 millimeter ram air kit will get you over 200. That's right. That will work. I've done half mile events with all kinds of card, not at sea level, and almost no one hit 200. It takes a lot of power. Well, doing it in a half mile versus doing it in something like this is completely different. Half mile is an acceleration contest. This is not that. What the car will ultimately go based on its power output versus aerodynamic at a top speed thing is not at all what it's doing in the half mile. A half mile is just a quarter mile drag race, except it's longer. But none of those cars would hit top speed in a half mile. If you gave them a mile, they would keep going unless they ran out of gearing. That is way more aero. Even the 85 TPI would go 155 with 230 horsepower. A Fox will need every area that air can catch sealed, like around the headlights. An 85, having owned one of those, an 85 Z51 with a 308 gear was 150 mile an hour car. That's why they did that. That's why they did that with that gearing, because their goal was to go 150, which that car did. And it was a little faster than the previous Crossfire injected deal. What would be some of the supporting mods you would do to make an engine happy for an entire run at the Silver State? Well, the one thing that I like to do, and I like to do this at Bonneville too, is I don't like to run a lot of RPM. So that's why I'm saying 6,000. I don't think I would run any more than that. In fact, I've never run 6,000 RPM sustained at the Silver State. All of my stuff has been, like, for a lot of it, for the initial stuff, was 4,500 or less, because that's what the gearing would allow, the gearing and power would allow. And running it in fifth gear at that RPM where it was going 146 or 47 miles an hour, or whatever, it would do that all day long. And that was with a factory tune and all that. So keeping engine speed down is a big thing. I wouldn't keep it down that low, but an oil cooler is a good idea. And make sure that you have enough cooling to keep the thing cooled at that speed. 530 horsepower BMW M6 could do 207. Lots more RPMs through. and an extra gear. Did you test it somewhere and it went that fast? Todd, what's going on? Did you hear about the EPA rolling back emission standards? I haven't heard that. My NASCAR buddy myself built a 540 big block. It had a 308 gear and a 700 R4 transmission for 1,000 horsepower. Raced against a Hellcat on the freeway. The race was over when I hit 6,000 RPM. Why was the race over at 6,000 RPM? Did you blow a tire or something? Richard, you need to find a McLaren Fox body kit that should help slip through the air. Mine has a Celine body kit on it. The rear wing is not ideal. In fact, we ended up replacing that with a wing that my buddy Bernie, the guy that you see in this photo here, the guy off to the left here, he made a much better wing for that Fox than that Celine was. I love the Celine body kit. I don't think there's anything better looking than that body kit that he did. He did a really nice job on that. But I personally think that that's a terrible wing for top speed. 6-speed probably helps over a long gear 5-speed. Remember, the CD of a Fox is 44. Yeah, that's not very good. I've been 190 with an LS7. Okay. I have a 79 Monte Carlo 400 small block, 700 R4. Put a limited slip with 373 gears. Stock 273 gears and never topped out. With the 373 gears, it tops out on speed. Should I keep the 273 gears with a limited slip? Are you, Thomas, are you trying to run the Silver State? I wouldn't ever run something where you used all of the gear. We had people, drag racers, come and bring a drag race car that they then put a bunch of gear in and found out that their drag race motor was not going to last for running that long. Some of them also brought cars where they were just on the rev limiter, which is also not a good idea. Much better, like I said, to run much less RPM. LS7 was 198. Okay. And I think if we ran the LS7, I haven't run one stock, but if we ran an LS7, it makes more than 500 horsepower the way that we tested. That looks like an off-the-shelf wing on the back. Did it actually help keep the back somewhat stable? Yeah, this car was fairly stable at speed. And like I said, he made he did it on his table, on his kitchen table, which is, the guy's an amazing fabricator. But he did a hinged wing off of it that we could adjust. It had rods on the back of it. And so it was more like an extension off of the back deck, but it had some angle to it. That was a Celine wing that we had on there. And like I said, they did a lot of, I don't know that they did any actual wind tunnel testing with it. I think that they did more like, hey, this thing looks really good. And it does. That's why I got it. Had some more to go, but had to back out because the truck started passing another truck ahead. I think it would get close to 200. I don't know what FURAI is. I personally drove a bone stock 85 vet to 155. It took 2 miles, but it did it. So I don't see why a Fox with the build you described couldn't at least get close to 200. Okay. Gearing to go fast exposes the need for torque. My C10 truck had 750 at the flywheel. Maybe the speedo was off, but I was wrung out. That's the other thing that I get from, because whenever I would go out to the Silver State, because I went out there a bunch, and we would talk to people about actual speeds. So our speeds are verified. And then the average speed obviously is verified. And then people would say, oh yeah, I remember I went out in my Mustang and man, it went 100 and whatever. And I was only at 3/4 throttle or half throttle. Like, yeah, none of that means anything. And also the speedometers on most production cars are like way off. Arc said would get to 170 quick. It would go from 10,000 to 6,000. Took forever to wind up. You are going 10,000 RPM. in a stock RX-7. I think 200 would be possible with 500 to the tire. Yeah, 500 to the tire would definitely do that, but not 500 flywheel. Had a Mavic with a decent built 40 over 302 that just had over 300 at the tire. 26 inch tires would top out at 155. I do all my testing in Mexico. That's right. The Miata the Miata had 300 at the tire. It had our old World Challenge motor in it, which was a Dart iron-headed, like B cammed thing, and it went 167. Packing air is a problem at speed for radiators from my experience at Fontana. Air work under the car can do as much or more than the body work and wings. Mine had what word am I trying to think of? It had the Celine air dam on it, but it also had a belly pan in the front and a belly pan in the rear. So the belly pan extended the cover for the gas tank and then went into the shelf basically and covered the shelf so air couldn't pack in to lift the car, because that's a problem with, that's why an LX was faster than a GT Mustang. The rear valence on the GT would fill up with air. We know because we raced one. We had to run that in one of the World Challenge races that we were at, and they made us run that, and you could see it at, I think this was at PIR, and you could see the thing just buffeting. It was really bad, and the LX is tucked up tighter, so it had that was less of a problem. But I put belly pans front and rear on the Mustang to try to help with that. I've never been 200 on four wheels, but we did it on a Hayabusa. Richard, have you heard any update on cannon valves from BTR or Frankenstein? I don't know anything about Frankenstein heads, but BTR has cannon valve heads. Here's a bad idea. A 6-liter T56 0.5 6-gear and a Jag IRS with a 288 final drive. So why is that a bad idea? I don't. I mean, are you going to run 3,000 RPM or something at top speed? That seems like way more gearing than the vast majority of things could run, unless it's a 300 or 400 mile an hour streamliner. 6 months to Bonneville. Got my M311 Frankenstein heads in today. Hoping to make good power. I'm trying to figure if I had a limited slip differential in my Accord, take off from a dead stop, one wheel starts spinning and seems like the other wheel hooks and leaves a little bit of a mark. How does, if one of them is spinning and the other one leaves a mark, that means they're both spinning, right? Or is one spinning and then the other one? Because then that's an open diff. Maverick had a 3-to-1 gear. If I ease into the gas and floor it at 15 miles an hour, both wheels hook and leave marks, and the front stops while spinning, or the front hops while spinning. Okay. I don't know what Robert, are you talking about a peripheral port? The Euro gray market M35 had 373 gears with a 0.9 overdrive. The Dynan turbo pulled to red line in 5th gear at 180. The US spec M6 was good for 174. I like those cars because the M5s and the M6s, both of those came out to the Silver State one of the years because I followed them out when we were driving on the highway. Both of those very, very cool cars. Neither one of them went that fast, but nice Mustang. I was just kidding about the bow tie, but I think you're right about fifth to sixth shift may drop RPMs too much to recover. Out of 15, ZL1 Camaro up to 163, but ran out of road. Yeah, that car makes a lot of power and would certainly go faster than that. 500 crank horsepower with 355 should work. Main concern is going to be stability, lowered suspension, especially on the front. The car looks like a front. You're on your car. You think that the front will get light? ZR rated tires is the most. Yeah, you have to have, if you're going to go fast at the Silver State, you have to have all of the things. You have to, I mean, this car has a cage in it and a fire system and stuff, or a fire extinguisher at least, and harnesses. And we had Z rated tires on it. I don't think I've ever had my ZL1 past 160s with a giant carbon fiber lunch table on the back. We just put one of those big spoilers on the back of my son's car. .500 crank and 355 gear should get to 200 miles an hour. Or you're talking about in the Mustang then? The front lift is not a concern. It doesn't do that. My 1LE Camaro did 160s. Was your 1LE Camaro was it an LT1 based 1LE then? Because none of the L98 stuff would go that fast. None of the stock stuff would go that fast. We did a lot of top speed testing on production stuff, and none of them went that fast. I have the OEM ZL1 1LE wing. It is a reasonably aggressive. I need a long stretch of road to top the car out. Yeah, and if you do, most of the things that have wings on, like I love that the Lamborghini Countach is a perfect example. It should have the wing on there. If I had one, it would have the wing on there, even though that definitely slows the car down. It was 2015. Oh, Gregory, your Camaro was a 2015. Okay, yeah. I thought you were talking about the old 1LE like IROC stuff. Back in the late 80s, my 931 blew past a CHP in Knight's Landing on Highway 113. Were the M5 and M6s you convoyed with dyno turbos? No, they were not. They were factory ones, and they were from Cunningham BMW, if I remember right. The Countach one doesn't give any downforce either. Well, it obviously has to give downforce because it has drag. You have the 8.8 in the car. Yeah, the original 8.8 is still in the car and has only been an 8.8 in that car. It's never had anything else other than the factory diff in that car. Yeah, Sean, that's why we put the spoiler on my son's car, because it does look cool. And it does. Now he needs some kind of matching air dam on it, or splitter or something. I don't want it to go too low. In fact, I'd like it just to stick out from where it is now so that he doesn't limit his ingress and egress going out of driveways and stuff even more so. And it has everything on it, I think, is production ride height, but it's not good. I had a 97 LT1, and at about 130 140, it just felt light, especially for our roads. Okay. I have an 850 real horsepower nitrous C5. John, you just have to do the calculation of whatever mile an hour you're running and see where the RPM versus gearing is. I don't know what RPM and mile an hour you're going through you're crossing the line at. If you're running out of RPM, then you need a 373. If you still have more RPM, then you need a 390. Scrolling. Yeah, we didn't have GM Stacy. We didn't. The cars. The nose isn't lifting. We're not worried about that. The car's pretty stable at speed now. We did a lot of work on the angle of attack, and like I said, having a belly pan and a rear belly pan worked out really good. And the Celine nose, the Celine front air dam and stuff is actually really good. The good thing about the second gen body is that it squats about 2 inches lower at 140. You have 2 inches of compression from aero loads on the car. 2 inches is a lot. So Todd, your passenger was arguing for a higher ticket? In the 80s, my buddy was working with Nissan engineers to determine what the causes of blowovers. His uncle piloted one of the famous BMW open cockpit blowovers. I don't remember the BMW ones. I'll have to go look at that. The Mercedes ones are the ones I remember. If road distance isn't an issue. Well, this is 93 miles, and one of the straightaways is more than 10 miles long. So on that section of straightaway, you will reach the top speed of the vehicle. Whatever the balance is between horsepower and aero, you'll reach it there because it doesn't take more than 10 miles to go top speed. What gear is in the 5-liter now? Right now it has I don't remember. It came factory with a 308. Look up Renault Laguna front lip spoiler. Everyone fitted to pretty much everything in the 90s as they were flexible if it heated up. A Renault Laguna front splitter. Celine got lucky with the front end, or did Steve do his homework? I don't know how much. I'd have to talk to Steve. I've talked to him a few times. I don't know if they did like actual, aero tuning in a wind tunnel with that. He was more interested in road racing. They use 400 pounds on the wing to simulate race speed deflection. The Dynan S38 engine M5 and 6 had a lot of success road racing, but we got penaltied out of the competition. I raced against what the heck's his name? He had a Dynan M5. His dad was a famous racer in the 60s. David Donahue was the driver, and I raced it in Bridgestone Supercar in the Mustang. His BMW was really fast. Missed the intro related though. I miss F-body gear calculators, which give you a table of RPM versus speed versus gearing. Yeah, this one. The beginning was about calculating speeds versus mile an hour on my Mustang with a T56 trans, and this information here is 4th, 5th, and 6th gear with a 308, a 355, and a 373 gear at 6,000 RPM with a 275 4017 tire. What's the tallest gear available for a Ford 8.8? I've seen 241s that were not offered in a Mustang, but they were offered in a, if I remember right, it was like a C6 3-speed Econoline van or something like that. We tried that one year for the Silver Stakes. I was thinking I'll just run it in 4th gear, but it wasn't a good combination with my T5 trans. They're using wind tunnel with a rolling tarmac, and the car would pack and then get porpoise and lift, allowing the air to get under the car. Okay. The rolling road and the inside the wind tunnel stuff is really good. We were young, didn't give anything about tickets back in the day. Okay. So you just wanted it verified that you were going 173? I say use the tallest gear available. GM10 bolt had 241 and 256s. We don't, as you can see from the BNR, as you can see from the calculations, we don't need those kinds of gears. We have a 308 with the 6-speed that we have is already way too much. That's 236 miles an hour at 6,000 RPM. So having more gear is not the issue. That's why I put up there 355s and 373s. We don't need to go to 273 or 250 or 240. We need to go the other direction because 6 gear is a 0.63 overdrive. GTP car made something like 10,000 pounds of downforce. Hard to spring that. Yeah, I bet. I know. I like the ideas that those cars with lots of downforce can run upside down. You hit 93 miles an hour in your 2.8 diesel. It's all of this stuff is relative. I'm as excited about going 119 miles an hour in the standing mile in the Sprint Turbo as I am going 226 miles an hour in the Civic or doing this stuff in the Mustang. The Mustang was kind of fun because it wasn't at Bonneville. That was a car that I drove every day. I drove out to the race and then ran it flat out in the Silver State and then drove it back. And, not a lot of guys were doing that. I ran a 273 gear behind my C4 in the Fox body. Which car was famously more aerodynamic when it went backwards? I don't remember which one that was. I do remember guys talking about that. There's a downfall of lower gears at times. More heat is generated. Gear oil gets hot. Like Silver State, how are you going to check 170 to 200 miles an hour? What do you mean? How am I going to check that? We've gone that fast. That's how we check it. I think we'd feel like a dog with a lower ratio, 373 or higher. Well, this car would be with a 5.3 in it and a 308 gear would be way faster than it ever was with the T5 in it and the 302. It would be night and day better, even with this gearing. Small displacement cars and motorcycles are the best. Okay. I do like my 1 liter stuff. It would be cool to have 1 liter bike power though in a Sprint Turbo. I'm not sure I'm ready enough to go 200 in a Fox. It's a lot easier in a Corvette. We just used to make fun of the Corvette guys because they could just drive out and you could in a C4 Corvette, if you put a 500 horsepower small block in a C4 Corvette, that thing went way more than 200 miles an hour. And it was aerodynamic and it was stable and all that. A Fox Mustang is not the ideal choice. Not for aero balance. It's the aerodynamic center pressure. None of those things are good on the Mustang. And also when you mess with trying to get the thing too low and going, because the road's not great. So there's a lot of frost heaves. So you come down on the bump stops and the thing wants to dart hard one side or the other. You're like, well, this is exciting. So, Mark, you got to go 30 miles an hour? My favorite top speed run was a CRX notchback with a turbo. With the new lower gear chosen, T56, only way to verify heat soak buildup in the differential within check is go out midnight street racing. Well, we could. I mean, having already run this 12 times, we're pretty confident that the trans is going to be fine and that the diff is going to be fine, having it already be fine. But we could put pumps and coolers if we wanted to do that. We could also put, temperature gauges on it. We just did a 323 gear set and a 2,800 pound Camaro. Yeah, Sean, Corvettes are like one arm out the window at 190. Those things are really nice. Can you have you pulled weight from the Mustang? Weight has no effect on top speed. Relative for the win. I'm guessing a C4 is heavily understated in today's performance landscape. I would not run an automatic transmission in the Silver State. I like manual transmissions. I think that the run sustained like that, I don't like what's going on in an automatic transmission. I think it heats up a lot. So you're going to fine tune the CVT, Mark? Sorry, is it 962 that blew over? Okay, yeah. Those are cool cars, though. Dan, what's going on? We're talking about gearing. So I was talking about the T56 trans in the Mustang with the 275 tire, 6,000 RPM, fourth, fifth, and sixth gears in the T56, and with 308, 355, and 373 gears, talking about the top speed. He's a 323 gear in my 70 Trans Am. Is this for road racing? It's for the Silver State race, really, but I did a lot of road racing with it. Predator 212. Later C4s are very underrated because of the earlier C4s. I remember there were a couple of guys that brought 84s and 85s out that they did, serious like carbureted small block swaps in them. In fact, Rick Doria went in his Corvette. He definitely went over 200 in his. I remember Matt telling me the story about him because they got to the rev limiter chip on his, and Matt like had to undo his harnesses when they were going that fast and kick the chip out so that they could go more speed. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool story. BMW 750 IL. Is there a drag racing formula to determine what gear, tire diameter you need to go through the traps at or near your known peak horsepower RPM? That assumes no tire spin. Well, you can definitely get this will tell you mile an hour in gearing and RPM, but it doesn't tell you what your car will get to at the end of the quarter mile. It just tells you if it's at this RPM with this gear and this mile an hour. It tells you all of that, but it doesn't tell you the acceleration rate of your vehicle. I can go as fast as your coupe in a 500 horsepower AMC Pacer. I like Pacers. There's a couple of them out there. Fish bowls. Add a 2-ton trailer to the back of the car and say weight makes a difference. It doesn't make any difference, but it would make a big aero difference. In fact, most guys at Bonneville add a bunch of weight to their car because they know it doesn't slow it down. Because top speed in your vehicle, especially like at the Silver State, top speed is only a function of the aero drag versus horsepower. I mean, if you made it 10,000 pounds or 50,000 pounds or something like that, something ridiculous, okay, that might make a difference, but not in the range that we're talking about. I agree. No autos at speeds. Yeah, I think that you have to have a lot of cooling to cool down the fluid. How much can you mill ahead before you have to change the push rods? Well, if you mill them 30 thousandths, you might have to change the push rods 30 thousandths. It depends on where you are on the push rod preload when you start. I was shocked at the handling capabilities of the C4. It was a serious car at the time. How do you want to run Silver State Classic fourth gear most of the time, fifth and sixth? You want to run, I like to run at the lowest engine speed I can at the highest vehicle speed that I can. But again, it depends. Most of the people 99% of the people that run the Silver State do not run as fast as they can. They enter into a specific class. So like the 150 class, that's where all the Corvette guys go. At least they did on the L98 stuff. They're modified L98s. So they would go, okay, I'm going to go out and run, and I'm going to try to run average exactly 150 miles an hour. So very few people are doing like what we used to do. We just go out there and go as fast as we can with whatever we have. We got kicked out a lot of times. But in the Mustang, I could do that because I had a cage and all that. But most guys are trying to target a specific average speed. In fact, like I said, almost all of them are trying to do that, except for the people in what's called the unlimited class. The unlimited class cars are guys that are trying to go really fast. Richard, with a power glide and a 323 gear, how much RPM would it take to break 200? Is a power glide 1-to-1 in top gear? And then what is the tire size? An L98 with heads, cam, and intake will make respectable power, particularly if you do something good on the intake and not have it be a tune port intake. Because then it's just a small block Chevy. Like you put a stealth ram on there, and instead of airflow research heads, then it's just a stealth ram, small block Chevy, which is good because now it can run some RPM. Can I use stock push rods on an LQ4 with a low buck truck cam and springs with LS7 lifters? Yeah, normally you can. The C4 was why the Corvette Challenge was created. Yep. Competition couldn't compete with a new platform. The C4 Corvette was racing at Nelson Ledges in the showroom stock races against the turbo 944s. And those were some really good races back in the day. Are you racing the Silver State? I don't know yet. How much power do you need to overcome drag at 195? It depends on what your drag is. The drag on obviously a Winnebago is different than it is on a like a Honda Insight or a Streamliner. It's next to nothing to get a car to go get a Streamliner to go 195. Headwind and crosswind will be a factor. 500 crank horsepower, 355, and 6-speed trans for the win. I'd like to see 100 miles an hour out of third gear. Yeah, I didn't calculate third gear, but it would definitely do that. It would definitely do that with a 308 gear. A stock 5.7 Charger will go faster than 150. I don't know how aero that car is. Your opinion on 4-speed and rear gear for drag racing in 8th mile? I don't know. I don't have anywhere near enough information for that. I don't know what your motor is. I don't know what the power output is. I don't know what the RPM range is. I don't know any of that stuff. Is the 500 horsepower limit a class thing? For me, no. That's just what we were talking about for what the motor would likely be. There's no limit for any classes. Like for the unlimited class, the best car that's ever come out there is, because they ran Big Red out there with had like a, I think at the time that it was running then probably was more like 750, a 540-inch all aluminum like big block in that 69 Camaro. But the best car to run out there, or the thing that we thought would win, and it has the record right now, I'm pretty sure, is somebody brought an old Cup car out there, and we know that a Cup car will go really fast, and it did. and the thing that's also important about it, because one guy brought an American Indy car out there, and it didn't make it but 5 or 6 miles before it just cracked the chassis on it, because it kept hitting. We're like, dude, how far can you raise this up? He goes, no, that's raised up all the way. That's at super height right now. We're like, yeah, that's not going to work. But a Cup car, you know, because you can make them do road racy things, and you can get enough, they're aero enough, they're slippery enough, you can make 1,000,000 horsepower with them, and they can withstand the road that's out there. And so that one's fast. Depends on the CD and the frontal area, but in NASCAR, we could run 210 with 400 horsepower on restrictor plate tracks. Glide is 1-to-1, 28 tire. Yeah, if you look right above you, Nathan, he's giving you some things. I love Guy Martin's world fastest van. What is that, Neil? I'm not familiar with that. It'd be fun to see a Dustbuster Lumina APV. Guy Martin riding at Pikes Peak on a turbo 1100. Playboy and Escort, yep. I know one thing, highway testing to 180 in California is not a good idea. Yeah, I don't do any of that. Yeah, Group B racing was definitely cool. I really like those cars. The CD on my Fiero is amazing. You went 150 miles an hour with 200 horsepower in a Fiero? That doesn't seem right. The back part of a Fiero is not good. I heard a rule of thumb to run 200 miles an hour is 600 horsepower. No, you could run 200 miles an hour with probably as low as 200 horsepower in if you did some of those motorcycle what the heck are they? Streamliners, like a motorcycle streamliner that has almost no frontal area where the guy's laying down on the ground. I bet he could go 200 with 200 horsepower. 600 horsepower, a lot of things could go 200. And you could go, like our Honda only needs about 400 to go 200. The Fiero's aerodynamic enough for space flight. That's right. And it's sealed apparently too. I'm going to make a carbon fiber late 90s Civic. Leroy with body just said under 400 horsepower, if that's accurate. Not sure how slippery the Mustang is. Richard, would you feel safe at 180 in my car? I have many times. How big of a fuel cell in your 5-liter Mustang did you run? I ran the stock tank, and then I ran a 10 or 12 gallon cell feeding. I just had a lift pump feeding into the filler neck of the factory tank. And so we ran all the pumps and stuff off of the factory tank. We just had it in the tank pump, and then an inline Bosch, like I think it was from a 930 or a 928. We had that Bosch pump feeding the thing when we had the supercharger on there. But I would just turn on a secondary lift pump as I was going. After I got about 40 or 50 miles in, I would just start feeding. It was pretty cool. I just start feeding the fill neck, and then I could watch the gas gauge go back up to full. It was awesome. It's good to be producing fuel while you're driving. That was really fun. That was a dumb way to do it, but it worked. I ran 180 down Highway 5. Some show where stock bikes can do 200. Yeah. Yeah, Neil, I'll have to check that out. I remember Big Red's original configuration 540 Lingenfelter had a 50-gallon cell. Yeah, they would have needed a lot of fuel for that thing. I ran out in the first time that I put the supercharger on there. I took it out and tried to run it with a stock tank. And I had a friend out there who had in fact, he's the guy that I bought the 85 Corvette from. He used to bracket race it. The car would run 1390s every time. But so I ended up buying his car, but he got one of those turbo Trans Ams with the Grand National motors in it. And he was running it. He came up to me and he said, you're going to run out of gas. I'm like, what are you talking about? I said, we had a lot of gas left when we ran it before. He goes, yeah, but you never run it with a supercharger on. He goes, you're going to run out of gas. You will not make it on 15 gallons or whatever. I think that's about what the stock tank was. I'm like, He goes, look, just take this. He gave me like a 1 gallon or 2 gallon gas can. He said, take this with you because you are going to run out of gas. I'm like, okay, you don't know what you're talking about. And I did. And he was right. I ran out of gas. I ran out of gas about the 67-mile mark. And I jumped out and did refueling and then took off again and then passed a Porsche and then ran out of gas on the downhill crossing the finish line because I was like, okay, I only got 2 gallons or whatever. And I got about 30 miles left. So, or a little less than 30 miles left. So I got to conserve. I got to get at least reasonable fuel mileage. But I'm like, I'm going like 110 or 120, trying to stay out of boost. And this Porsche turbo passed me. I'm like, like I'm going to use up all my fuel and I'm going to run out of gas again. But he was right. And that's why we put the fuel cell in, because we needed more fuel. My factory ZX14 will go 200 if you remove the governor. Fiera would have had great potential, even probably beat the Corvette on track with the right suspension and engine. Burt Monroe, yeah, the world's fastest Indian. Indian motorcycle with a little more than 100 horsepower. I don't know what the power output of that Indian was. Would the next consideration be how often you need to accelerate versus hold top speed? That should always be a consideration. It's way more important how the car accelerates versus top speed. That's why I was always ostracized. why all of my life I've been foolish, because I was more concerned about top speed. In a 5-liter Mustang, which is the worst thing that you could get. Like I should have got a Camaro or a Corvette or something that would actually be a top speed car or a reasonably safe top speed car and have good aero. But it's way better to have a car that accelerates fast because you use that way more often. But, we don't always do things that are logical. Neil Fedderson from TurboTech in Hollywood tested a 24-hour Sebring car down the freeway. I geared our race car to go 220 at Riverside way back when. It scared the driver. He'd never gone that fast before, lap after lap. At Riverside, it would do that? I have a similar plan, but opposite for my Chevy 454. 16-gallon fuel cell on the bed with classic Instruments tubular sending unit. Left the stock 32-gallon saddle tank hanging. Cars get horrible mileage at speed. Yeah, under 4 miles per gallon. That's what That's about where mine was. 200 asphalt is different than 200 on salt. Yep. There's way more grip on asphalt. Going to use a Mallory Comp 110 carburetor pump. Remember the Can-Am Porsches under 2 miles per gallon when racing? Yeah, Dan, actually it surprised me because I remember when we were World Challenge racing that the car doing like accelerating on and off, it got way worse mileage than my thing did running flat out. 2000 Trans Am, 99 Z28, 571 horsepower, 520 foot-pounds, 410 automatic, 2800 at 75 miles an hour. That's a lot. That's a lot of buzzing. Does anyone have an answer for what kind of cam kit I should get that can handle 1,000 horsepower comfortably and reliably? I don't care about the chop. I'm looking for longevity. Yeah, you should get a low buck truck camshaft from my store. You can easily make 1,000 horsepower with it, with a turbo, I'm assuming, because 1,000 horsepower with a cam is only going to happen with boost. I'll take acceleration over top end. Be fine with a 5.0 at 200 miles an hour. Just have to figure out downforce. That's not an issue. That the Mustang's already set up for that. Riverside had the longest straightaway in NASCAR, over 1 mile long. I know, but Dan, I was thinking about the super speedway stuff where you're sustained running, not accelerating up to speed. What fuel did you use in the Silver State? In mine, we would use pump gas when it was naturally aspirated, and then when we put the blower on it, we would mix in some race gas. The 928 was a good top speed car. It was. Porsche set with Al Holbert set some. They did some top speed testing with those, which was cool. Bought a Jazz 16-gallon fuel cell for the 70 Trans Am. Nice. Really want a custom 40 to 50 gallon cell to use up all the trunk space. The cell that I used, I took out of the Mustang and then we put in the Civic, and that was the ice water cell for the back of the Civic when we set land speed records with the Civic. So we're recycling stuff. Is anyone cooling their fuel when recirculating? I haven't. Probably only because I haven't monitored the fuel temperature in the tank, which is bad. Especially bad when we tried to run the Silver State with turn downs on the exhaust. And I know that it was probably trying to boil the fuel in the tank. And we know that because it melted the plastic container around the fuel tank, that's not a good situation. I think the Eclipse topped out at 160. Was it a turned up boost kind of Eclipse thing? Remember they had restrictor plates at super speedways. Dan, when do they institute restrictor plates? They didn't have restrictor plates with the big block stuff, right? We used dry ice around the fuel cell when we had the 16 or the 1,000 horsepower Evo. You were cleaning the streets for the other racers. It's more like I was dropping parts. Holbert set records of 171, yeah, with a 928. Porsche claimed to be the fastest production car at the time. Yeah, they did that at Bonneville too, right? And didn't they change the final drive in that to get that speed out of it? Silver State, I heard, is brutal. It's not. The Silver State was awesome, especially at the beginning of the Silver State. Like the guy that went through with the Bentley Turbo R was awesome, and the guy that brought out the Saab Sonnet with a iron 289 in it was there's just like lots of cool stuff there. But for a guy like in a Corvette, he just drives the Corvette out, does it in the 150 or 160 class or whatever, or 140 or 110 or whatever, and then goes home. It's not even a hard thing for him. Went from stock 4.8, which did 14 city with an 1800 stall, the 5.7, the truck Norse cam, and only has 10 city. That's what the fuel mileage change was. What if you got one of the ProMed one-piece front ends? Yeah, I don't want to do that. The car. I like the car. I like the way that the car looks already. I could make it a lot more aerodynamic, but that's not the point. What's the difference between Silver State and Bonneville Salt Flats? I was thinking they're about the same thing, but never looked it up. No, the Silver State race is a closed highway for 92 miles. So it's nothing at all like the Bonneville Salt Flats. The Bonneville Salt Flats is the short course is 3 miles and the long course is 5 miles, and it's on salt. And so you just accelerate up to speed. The Silver State is running, for most people, it's not running flat out. For most people, it's more like a rally. So you're trying to average an exact speed over that distance from the start to the finish. So a lot of these guys have these rally clocks and all this stuff. They're like, okay, we're averaging this amount. We need to stay exactly at this speed. We need to speed up a little bit. We need to slow down a little bit. I'm like, well, I'm not doing any of that. We just bring cars out there and try to go fast. And we enter in some class that we think that the car would fit in. But when the Silver State first started, it was just you go out and go as fast as you can. And they just, I remember the first 2 years, they just walked up to you and said, okay, what car is this? I'm like, it's a 5-liter Mustang. And they're like, well, how fast do you think the car will go? I go, I know it will go 146 because I've already topped it out. I know exactly what it'll do. But everybody was telling them all kinds of things. Like I had a guy in a Volkswagen Rabbit. Oh, no, this thing will go 150. I'm like, that car is not going 150. Not a naturally aspirated Rabbit is not going to do that. That's a 16 valve. I'm like, I don't care how many valves it has. It's not going 150. And it didn't. It went like 132. And so I passed him. There was a guy in a 59 Corvette. Oh, yes, this thing's going to go 160. I'm like, that car is not going 160. And I passed him. And then a Jaguar. And then so like in the first race, I passed 9 people because none of those 9 people were accurate about what their cars would do or what they would do in their cars. Like, I don't know that they were going like where was it all the way down, like they have it to the wood, like I did. I was like, okay, whatever this is doing, I'm going. In fact, the first year, man, I got a cramp in my leg after about 10 miles because I was leg pressing at like 3,000 pounds, like the gas pedal. I'm like, oh yeah, the gas pedal doesn't need me to push it through the floorboard to actually just get wide open throttle on my little throttle body. I could ease up on the pressure there a little bit so my leg's not quivering. There. I was at Bonneville. I know it was lowered. Not sure about gearing. Modified. I don't know what that was about. Let's scroll back and see what you were talking about. Oh, Holbert. Yeah. I think they started plate races in the 80s. Okay. Were there any NSXs at the Silver State back then? I didn't see any of them. I don't remember seeing one there, which would be a pretty good car, especially back then with like the Comptech blowers that they had on them, or a turbo thing on an NSX would be good. There were a couple of turbo RX-7s that came out, and those had trouble finishing. Yeah, Sean, it is a good place to do top speed stuff. And they do it, at least, and I haven't been since they started doing this, but the day before they would have a car show, which we did, but they also had a thing where you could go out and run on, they had like a mile stretch or something. So you could go do acceleration runs, which were good because, you know, other people used to go out at night and do that and tune their stuff. But you could go and I get stuff tested and see how fast your car went in this acceleration thing. That's all cam. I gained 5 miles per gallon with a -9 overlap cam and gained 25 wheel horsepower. 323 gear between both 4L60 trans, but the tune itself to run is questionable. It was actually 1970 on longer tracks, longer than I've been racing. So did they have the When did they go from the big blocks to the small blocks? That was in like the early 70s, right? Early to mid 70s. I don't care how many valves it has. So you're saying I should put cruise control with rev limiters and win? There you go. Trip computers, timers, made boring stuff. Yeah, these guys are using the Helder rally clocks and stuff. I'm like, you guys are missing what this thing's all about. Yeah, just engage the cruise control. But the problem is you had to accelerate from a start. And can your cruise control keep the speed consistent in the turns? Can you go, like if you're trying to average 150, can you go 150 in the turns? On some of them, you won't be able to do that. What tires do you use for the Silver State? We used Z-rated. I want to say they were GSCSs back then, or maybe R1s, BFGs. The cheating fuel thing was real. We tried all kinds of different things. Nitro, propane, toluene. Dual or single valve springs for under 1,000 horsepower. Handling in 03. Are you talking about the valve springs in the motor? Tell me more about your motor. Tell me what's going on there. Because the springs have nothing to do with the power output if this is a turbo motor. That's going to be more a function of RPM and lift and the camshaft. I have a Colorado that put a 6-liter in. 373 gears. I'm not finished with the build yet, but I think we'll be faster than I'm willing to go. A guy I knew used to build CRX turbos. He raced an NSX once, pulled up, and the NSX driver was Jensen Button. Jensen Button knows how to get around the track. He be rolling, they be hating. My Corvette's cruise control isn't consistent in a straight line on the highway unless it's over 2,000 RPM. We always wondered about that. I don't think I ever tried setting the cruise control on my Mustang, which it had cruise, at like 150 or something. I don't know if it would engage. I think it would. I don't know that they would make it not engage at speed. Yeah, big blocks, Dan. I got that. I did an LS Turbo 3rd gen last year that had a 6-speed. The stock gears, top 4th, you were getting down. Yeah. Yeah, a Turbo LS with the kind of gearing that we're talking about is nuts. Cruise control disables at a certain speed. It's way over 90 because we've set it above 100. At least on the Mustang it would. But I just never tried doing it at 150. BS 1971 is when they went from big blocks to small blocks. Gears can make it feel like it adds 100 foot-pounds. It really does, because I remember putting, I think the most gear I ever put in the Mustang, I can't remember if I put 373s. I know I put 355s in it, going from because we also tried 273s, and it was a big difference in the way that the car drove around town. Turbo 4.8, 600 lift now. I'm debating on single or dual spring. I'm trying to reach right under 1,000 horsepower. Okay, and how much RPM are you running? And what is the duration on the camshaft? But a dual spring is going to be better for that, probably. Unless you have, you don't, there's so many things here. You don't need a really big camshaft for that, especially on a 4.8. I'd pick a small cam for that. for your turbo to make 1,000 horsepower. Because if you have 1,000 horsepower turbo on a 4.8, you are going to be much happier with a smaller camshaft because it's going to spool the turbo up better. Texas has a Texas mile. The cruise control, my GT2 shuts off at 145. Okay. I'm surprised on a Porsche because I would have thought that they would have allowed guys on the Autobahns and stuff to run at elevated speeds with the cruise control on. The automobile catalog gear rating is 245 for our car. The factory says it will do 187 and we added 250 wheel horsepower. That's right. We're riding dirty. Huh, Bruno? Gonna catch me? VW cars do limit speed cruise control. My BMW N6, I can tell you the cruise control, it'd gauge at whatever speed I wanted. Nice. Liability, yeah, that would be true. They don't want you setting cruise control at 200. 1971 for our code Cleveland. The German vehicles seem to lie about what stuff is limited to. And it's different in other countries than it is in the United States. Probably want you concentrating more. I know. Good talk. Good talk. Restrictor plate racing started on big blocks. That's part of the reason they quit running them. They got by without them on small blocks until Billy Elliott at Talladega in the mid-'80s, officially 212. Maybe pick a class speed, make that your fifth gear ratio, then you have some room to stretch. GM cars have a fuel cut. Yeah, a lot of them are limited. Richard, I heard automatics don't lose boost through the shifts. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think probably some of the automatics now shift so fast that there should be minimal drop. I have to check the speed ratings on my tires. Yeah, if you're going to go to Silver State, you got to, especially if you want to go fast, you got to, stuff's got to be right. I see boost spikes on shifts in my Silverado. I was told the German speed limits are gentlemen's agreements. They did that on the Japanese cars too, on the JDM stuff. They limited the power ratings for like the 2Js and the RBs and stuff. Top speed fuel cut was 97 in my 454. HarperTech brought that to 128. I remember the supercharged Grand Prix that we had because I tried to talk a guy into letting me run his computer that had the speed limiter removed on it. I'm like, you're running in a class that's below what the speed limiter is. I said, so just let me use your computer because I'm going to run flat out. We got this thing making like 300 at the tire or whatever. We want to see how fast it'll go. No, I can't do that. I'm like, you are such a giant V. I paid for the whole speedometer. That's right. Back in the 80s, you paid for the whole speedometer, but it only went to 85. I remember my Mustang. I think that used to be a thing with the Mustangs, is that you could change and then recalibrate the speedometer. So you could get 150 or 160 mile an hour speedometers. The DSG type transmission shift really quick. Yeah. Yeah, the Japanese were all, was it 300 or was it 286 or something? Some weird number, right? It was a gentleman's agreement. Yeah, this only makes 286. Well, the last one made 286, and you just listed like 7 different upgrades that you did that didn't change the power at all. Yeah, it's still that much. My dog's ears went up. Yeah, they're in Paw Patrol mode. Paw Patrol. Dude, I've been here an hour and a half. What are you guys doing? 276? Okay. On that note, guess what? It is time to go. But good show, good times, good times, good times. But I will be back tomorrow. And so I'll see everybody tomorrow.